Hello, 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 everybody. I see several of you on now. I see Sander, Nobel, Credo. How y'all doing?
Good evening, sir. I hear you very good and see you. How do you read me?
X. I hear you loud and clear, but I don't see you. Something's wrong with your camera. I do not see you.
Okay, one moment. Okay,
Okay, I see you there. How are you doing? How are you?
good. Thank you.
Let's see, several more people coming on in. We'll give them a few more moments to get ready. Today's session is going to be strictly Q&A. So we're going to go through everybody's questions. And we'll be people, 5 or 6 minutes in the hot seat each, and we'll go through the questions, get answers. I'm actually joined here with another instructor, so we'll have two guys on board for at least part of the meeting today, not the whole thing, to kind of go through some stuff and make sure everyone is helped. Um, a few more minutes for people to come on in. Hello, Ellie, John, sup? How y'all doing?
What's up, guys?
Sup? Nobel, where are you from? How's it
Hello.
going?
I'm fine. I'm from Bangladesh.
Oh, cool, cool. Very cool. Are you working on your instrument rating or are you an instructor or what's going on?
No, I'm currently doing my commercial pilot license in Argentina.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm waiting for my check rate in 1 month.
Very good. Very good. What airplane are you flying over there?
Cessna 152 and 172.
What
And
airplanes?
sometimes I fly Tecnam P2008, more or less.
Okay. Have you ever flown the Tecnam P2006T?
No, never.
No. I've always wanted to fly one of those. They're very small twins, but they're very light. They're very cheap to fly, very expensive to buy, very expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
Kirilo, have you ever flown one of those?
Um, about Techno, now I based in Poland, and nearby it is airfield, small airfield which operates a few flight schools, and they have it. I know this aircraft. I haven't ever flight, but I know that it's about 1,000 kilograms. It
Mhm.
has two Rotax engines, and it's a very funny aircraft, I think, because it's I don't know any something the same aircraft. It's good.
Sure,
And
sure.
yes, uh, now I'm a valid pilot on Antonov 26. Have a total flight time about 700 hours, and of course IFR rated. And
Very cool.
that's all.
Oh, let's see here. Well, glad to have you. John, tell us about yourself. I'll wait for some more people to pop in.
CFI, double I, MEI, ATP, flew for Raytheon for more than a decade, flew for Ameriflight for a while. And now I generally work with instrument students and students who want to be CFIs. That's kind of my niche.
Very cool. Now let's see here. Um, oh, you're that John. Okay, cool, cool. I was like, you look familiar. I was trying to figure out which John were you. No, you're John. That John. Okay, cool. So
I
do you
figured
fly
I'd
the
pop in
MP?
and listen in today.
Oh, very good, very good. Well, you'll be able to be more, I can't talk today. More than happy to hear your input on some of these questions as well. You can kind of give some professional insight as well. That way it's not just me and Josiah having to take up the slack. So very good. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We've got, looks like 8 or 9 guys in here right now. We'll go ahead and get started on some questions and answers and just kind of see what's going on. So today's call is going to be strictly Q&A. Some of the questions that may go a little bit longer, that's fine. We can kind of dig into some of those. We've got an hour to go through some of these. So guys, go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom on the gestures feature. You should be able to click the raise hand button, and then we'll start going from there and just going through questions about instrument ratings, instrument instructors, anything like that. So you guys can go ahead and just start doing that. So who's got a question? Anybody? I can make up some questions too if we need to. I mean, I can pull out some FAQs, but Nobel, let's go with you. What's currently eating you alive in your instrument training? What's the problem?
Okay, the problem is holding patterns. I feel many difficulties in that. So I can't figure out I mean, which way should I intercept, like parallel or direct, or
Okay, perfect. I love that question. I love that question. So
Thank
let
you so
me
much.
pull that up now. I have a very cool app. No problem. I have a cool app on my laptop that
Okay.
we're going to use. The topic is holding patterns. Let me pull up my screen share. Okay, very good. Here we go. Screen share. Here we go.
Is the membership changing now or what?
Hold on. Who said that?
It's Cole.
Oh, one second. I don't see the chat here. No, membership is not changing. Membership is going to be free. However, if you want in on the group calls, then except for these 6 ones, and that's paid. So you're already covered. Yeah, you're covered. You're good.
Yeah, because I was trying to find that link, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I changed it. We'll get to all that stuff later. I've got a whole email I'm going to send to everybody. That way they know what's going on. But I decided the other day to make some changes because I want to get more people involved in this program. But I had to make sure it's labeled in the right way. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody except for Nobel. Is it Nobel or Noble? How do you say your name?
Noble. Yeah, Noble.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody except for you.
Okay.
Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. Okay, there you go. Okay, so your question was holds. How do I enter holds? How do I intercept? And kind of how do we do that? That's basically your question, right?
Yeah. That's the question.
Okay, very good. Okay, are you flying with a VOR indicator or are you flying with an HSI?
HSI indicator.
Okay, so we're going to use the HSI that is here then. Does that look good to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Or you can switch to viewer if you want.
Okay.
Because maybe
we'll use VORs and HSI. Tell you what, we'll start with VOR because it is less it's not as easy. So we'll do this first.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So let's say here that we are flying along and we are told to do a hold. Okay. So this is the VOR. VOR number 1 is right here. Step 1, of course, is to go to the VOR. We can't start a hold at a VOR unless we're going to the VOR. Correct? So
correct.
What we'll do is we'll take our OBS and we'll spin it until we get a 2 indication and it's centered.
Right.
That will take us direct to that VOR. Now, of course, there may be a scenario where the air traffic controller tells you to, join an airway or something like that, and you would have to fly to intercept that airway or that radial, and then right. But let's just go ahead and say that you are already direct to the VOR.
Okay.
So we're going to presume that for right now. So basically, tell you what, Josiah, give me a radial to hold on, and give me a turns, like left or right turns.
Skyhawk.
305.
Well, Josiah, just say a radial and a direction.
All right. On the 090 right turns.
Okay, 090 left turns. So what we do is this. As the VOR indicator is centered, okay? As the VOR indicator is centered, the controller told us to hold on the 090 radial left turns. So step 1 is to draw a dot in the middle of your CDI, just like this. Then draw from the middle of the CDI out to 090, which is here. Then what you're going
Okay.
to do is draw a little bit of an arrow right here to the middle of your CDI. That is your inbound. Now, the controller said left turns. So from here, just draw a little tick, just like that. And that is what your hold will look like. Now, of course, the hold will be something like this, and you'll go around, like that, right? But I only draw this. So based on this information, you can figure out what your entry should be simply by determining what is the easiest method to get from my current position to the inbound. So we are down here flying towards the VOR, correct?
Right.
So right here, when we get to the VOR, we're going to turn outbound, and then we're going to do a parallel entry. Just like that. That is the easiest way to intercept this radial. Now, you're wondering, well, how do you know that's the easiest way? Well, because I just showed you, that is the easiest way. If I back up a different color and I show you a different entry, let's say we do a teardrop. I go to the VOR, and then I would have to turn 30 degrees outbound like this, see, and come back around. That doesn't make any sense because I have to do this large turn here with no accurate means of navigation. So that's obviously
Right.
incorrect, right? And then if I was to do a direct entry, well, I'm not even sure how I could do that. I would have to go to the VOR and then like come back out this way and then do that. That doesn't make any sense either. See? So the
Right.
only realistic option here is to do the parallel entry. So that's what we would do. So let's go ahead and do the example again. So Josiah, give me another radial and another direction.
300
Okay, we'll do 300. So 300,
on the
you
left.
start. Okay, perfect. So you start in the middle, you draw out to 300, and then you do a left turn like that. Then, of course,
Left
draw
turn.
the arrow
Right.
towards the VOR. So in this case, it's very simple. What's the easiest way to enter this? You go to the VOR. In this case, looks like a direct entry would be just fine. You
Right.
just cross the VOR and fly outbound. Just like that. Now you might wonder, well, what heading do I fly outbound? Well, you fly, that one. Unless there's wind, If there's wind, you might have to correct a little bit. But even then, on the entry, there's a lot of grace there, because in reality, a hold looks more, let's say this here. Let's say I'm holding inbound on the 360 here. I'm doing right turns. Holds, and John will tell you this as well as Josiah, that the holds do not look like this. That's a fairy tale, version of a
Yeah.
hold. Those don't exist. A real hold looks a lot more like this. Let's say that we have a strong wind coming from this direction, lots of
Okay.
wind. A real hold looks something more like this. You come inbound, and then you get blown way over here, and then you have to correct, this way to get back towards the radial, and then somewhere around here, maybe you're lucky and you can turn back inbound and intercept. And sometimes you might, blow past it because you overshot and you have to come back around, and maybe you turn too early and you have to do this and whatever, right? But eventually you get back to this line and you're able to, go inbound back again, right? So this is what a hold really looks like. And in fact, the whole purpose of the hold is to do what I call a perpetual course reversal. I'm going to write that down. A hold equals a perpetual course reversal, right? It's basically,
Right.
think of it this way. Let's say that a hold does not exist. Let's just say holds don't exist. We no longer do racetrack patterns. We don't do those. Let's just pretend that those do not exist. Okay. So how would we be able
Okay.
to stay in one position over a VOR? Well, the only option, that makes sense to me would be something like this. We go to the VOR, we cross it, we go out for a minute, and then, do a course reversal and come back in. Then when we cross the VOR, we go out for a minute, do a course reversal and come back in and just go,
Right.
back and forth as many times until we're done holding our position. But this takes up a lot of space and it's not very practical. So we don't do that. That's why the FAA invented the idea of a holding pattern in the shape of, a racetrack. So this time instead, what we'll do is we'll get to this radial and get to the VOR. Because see, think of it this way. We can't do turns around a point on instruments.
Right.
It's impossible. But what we can do is track radials, right? Anybody can easily plug in the radial. Let's say they want to fly the 030 inbound or 040 inbound, like I have selected right here. Anybody can select that and fly it, right? Easily. The trick is, though, is once you get to the VOR, now what do? You have no other radial to fly in order to get back to this one. So what you'll end up doing is this. You'll get to the VOR. I'll change the color. You'll get to the VOR, and then you'll just turn around. You're going to reverse your course. And on this turnaround, you're simply going to fly as far out as you can. If it looks like this or if it looks like this, it doesn't matter. You're going to fly out as far as you can until it's time to turn back to a heading that will allow you to intercept this radial that you had previously selected. The whole point is getting to this radial. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically the way you want to look at that, is cross the VOR, turn the opposite direction until you're far enough to be able to turn back in and intercept. Now, in a perfect world with no wind and perfect piloting technique, you should be able to, in order to fly the FAA required, 1 minute inbound below 14,000, you would do a turn here, you'd fly out for 1 minute, and by the time you did that, when you started your turn back in, you would end up, right here at the perfect spot for 1 minute. But that doesn't always work because of wind. So your job is really to do this. Get to this radial. When you're there, turn back around, figure it out, and then rejoin this radial back in.
Right.
That's the biggest thing with the hold that people need
I
to
was always
understand.
thinking that I have to make a perfect shape, even with the winds and everything. So
No,
I was
you
always
don't.
thinking that you have to make a perfect shape.
No, you don't. All you have to do is do this. And I'll show you the easiest way to figure out your wind in a hold is this. Let's say here, I'm going to change the whiteboard a little bit. I'm going to move the airplane to this position here. I'm going to center this on the 360 inbound. So let's say that we are, let me change it. There we go. The simulator is not very accurate here. But let's say that we are on the 360 course inbound, which is the 180 radial. And I have the airplane set up here on a heading of 005. See? It's about a 5-degree wind correction angle. So in this example that I'm drawing, the wind is blowing this direction. So our wind correction angle, right? Our inbound is 360, but our heading is 005.
005.
Which means our wind correction angle is 5 degrees.
5 degrees.
Right?
Right.
So if our wind correction angle on the inbound is 5 degrees, the rule for wind correction on the outbound, is 5 degrees, so it'll be wind correction angle on the inbound times 3, which equals 15 degrees. That's the rule. So whatever your inbound wind correction is,
Okay.
if your inbound correction is 5, then your outbound is 15. You just simply multiply times 3. Now, some other instructors will tell you to multiply by 2. And here's the thing. It's close. It also works. You're really just guessing the whole time exactly what the wind is and what your wind correction angle is. You're never going to be perfect. So that's basically what you would do. So in this case, as you're coming into the VOR here, you're coming in. Can you see that line okay?
Yeah.
Okay. As you're coming into the VOR, you're flying at a heading of 005. What you would do, instead of turning around to a heading of 180, you would turn to a heading of 165 instead, which is 15
Minus
degrees into
15.
the wind. Yeah. And you fly
Mm.
165 outbound for, about a minute or so. And it may need to be longer than a minute because you have a little bit of a headwind now, but just make it simple and say a minute. And then when you get to the end of your minute, under 14,000, then you would turn back around and the wind will push you like this because you have the wind here.
Mm-hmm.
You would fly a heading to intercept the radial and come back in. And that's it.
You're right.
So does that answer your questions on entering holds and the wind correction side of things?
Yeah.
Pretty well. We'll do just for everybody else in the chat here that hasn't seen it. We're going to go ahead and do maybe 1 or 2 more examples of entries, just so you can see what that might look like. Okay, let me see something real quick. Okay, let's do a different radial. Go ahead and Nobel, give me a radial and a direction.
So you're inbound on radial 350 and the hold is at 120 on
Okay,
the right.
perfect. So you start in the middle, you draw 120, you draw an arrow here, then you turn to the right, and that's easy because this is a direct entry.
No, you're coming from 350.
Oh, you're coming from 3.5. I see. I see. Well,
Okay.
in this example, we are right here. So I'll change that. So we're coming from 350. So 350 from would be a 1702. So I'll switch this to 1702, and then I'll move the airplane to be right here.
Right.
So you said 120, right? So we start in the middle, we go out to 120, we draw an arrow to the VOR, and we do right turns like this. And that
Okay.
is very easy because this is a parallel entry. Just like that. See, it's easiest to do a parallel entry there because you don't have to, cross it and then do that. That makes no sense, and neither does that. What makes the most sense is to cross the VOR, fly outbound for a minute, and then circle back and rejoin. And then, of course, once you're inbound, join the radial, and then, do that.
Okay.
Let's do 2 more examples, and this time you're going to tell me what we're doing. So, Josiah, give me a radial.
Let's see. Hold on the 240.
Okay, 240, and we'll do right turns. So 240, we start in the middle, we draw out to 240, we draw a line here, we put in our turn, All right, Nobel, what is the hold entry?
It should be parallel.
Well, a parallel would do this. And that doesn't make any sense. Right? Which looks easier? A
Or
parallel?
direct. Okay, we can go direct, right? Direct to
We
the
could
outbound rotor.
we could probably go direct. And I'll say this is very important. Hold entries are recommended, not required. This is very important for you guys to understand. Hold entries are recommended, not required. So you can pick however you want to enter this hold. Doesn't matter. It's just a matter of what's recommended, because what's recommended is probably going to be the easiest. So that's the whole point. So direct would probably work as well. You could fly out and go direct like this. In this instance, I would fly a teardrop because I think teardrop would be easiest. You just turn outbound 30 degrees, give myself a minute, and then I would turn back in. That's what I would do, but a direct might do it as well. The issue with direct is that you might turn too quickly and get too close to the radial. See? And when you
Okay.
come back in, you might overshoot, and it's a little bit more difficult. So I personally like the teardrop method for that one.
Got it.
All right, let's do another one. Let's see. Let's do the 190 radial. And let's do left turns. What will this be?
Teardrop.
This would be a parallel. As we cross it and we go out, it takes the least amount of turns. See? That would be a parallel. Let's do it again. 120. We draw the line in. And we're doing right turns. You remember, you are down here, right? Your airplane is right here,
Okay.
right? That the airplane is always coming from the bottom here. So you're going this way. How would you enter this?
Parallel, right?
Parallel is correct. You would parallel the radial, and then you would turn inbound. Now,
Right.
let's say it was opposite of that. Let's say it was a left turn. Now, what would you do?
We can do a teardrop.
Exactly. A teardrop looks like this, and then we come in like this. Perfect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, great question. Great question. So we're going to move on to someone else's question now. But did that really
Okay.
answer your questions and give you some assistance?
Yeah, really, it helped me a lot. Thank you so much.
Hey, no problem, man. No
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
Oh, okay, this next person, go ahead and raise your hand in the chat, and we will go to something else. And while y'all are trying to figure out who has the questions, John, you are correct here. It says that the requirement of hold entries is staying on the protected side of the hold. I'm going to make an adjustment to that statement. You're 100% correct. It's not about the protected side of the hold. It's about the holding side of the hold, because there is no protected area of a hold. It's not protected or unprotected. There's only a holding side and a non-holding side. And I'm going to draw that out actually on the whiteboard here to kind of show you guys a little bit of what the point is there. So if we look at this here on my whiteboard, you're going to notice that the VOR is here and you have your inbound here. See? a hold is always going to have more protected area on the holding side of the hold, if we're doing, you know, standard right-hand circuit. It's going to have a more of a protected area over here on the holding side, HS for holding side, and less of a protected area here on the non-holding side. This is the non-holding side. Because think about it. If you were to say that this is the unprotected side, then what you're implying now is that if I am flying on this hold and I'm going out and, you know, I say overshoot, oh, great, I'm not protected anymore. Well, no, you still are protected. You still have an area of airspace that by the FAA is designated as being, you know, surveyed or whatever to guarantee that you're not going to hurt yourself. But you now have to get back to the holding side and get back to that radial. So that's just the only adjustment to that statement is it's all about staying on the holding side, which is over here. So when you're doing an entry, change the color here and change the thickness. When you're doing an entry, say from here, right, this direction, a teardrop keeps you on the holding side, right? Or if you're coming from this direction over here, right? Technically, if you were to cross the VOR and then parallel, you would actually, you could be on the radial or slightly offset of the radial on the parallel entry. And this actually puts you on the non-holding side for a little bit, in which case you would fly it out for a minute close to the radial and then turn back in like this and then intercept, which puts you back on the holding side of the radial. So that's kind of how that works. But yes, as you were saying, the requirement of hold entries is stay on the proper side of the radial. Of course, parallels are the only slight exception to that. But even then, you're still in protected airspace. You're still on the non-holding side, but you cannot be quite as far out. There's a limit to how far out you can go on that. So that's the answer to that point there. Okay, who else has a question or things they want to discuss? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. We've got 30 minutes left. Josiah, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Not really a question, but yeah, I want your thoughts, especially John, or even from other students, from students' perspective. I was never taught the 5 T's. I teach it now, but yeah, what are, in addition to that, or yeah, how do we improve on the 5 T's, the turn, time, twist, throttle, talk? Of course, not all of the time. Not every step of the flight it applies.
Sure.
But yeah, so what are, as a student, has that been helpful? And yeah, how do we improve upon that to stay ahead of the airplane?
Sure, that's a good question. Does anybody here have an answer to that question from a student perspective? And while y'all figure that out, I'm going to pull up my iPad and draw this out. But the idea of the 5 T's or the 6 T's in instrument training, who has anybody here? Has anybody struggled with that or had any questions or concerns about kind of how that applies? Go ahead and drop it in the chat or unmute your microphone and just start talking about it.
About the 5 T's.
The 5 T's.
So you turn, time, twist, talk, throttle, and that's it, right? Turn, time, twist, talk, and I think that's 4 T's. You turn to the heading, then you twist the radial. You should be on at least 90 knots, and you're talking when you're established. That's about it, actually.
Yeah, so the turn, time, twist, throttle, talk, track is the one that I use. Josiah, do you use track in your 6 T's or 5 T's as well?
I didn't. I mean, if it applies, I say that the track applies when you're turning or twisting. So I stick with the 5 T's. So yeah, if applicable, you track when you're twisting or whatever you're twisting to.
Okay, cool. I am going to start a broadcast on my iPad and actually go to my notes. and draw this out with my Apple Pencil, kind of how I deal with this. So I use the 6 T's instead of the 5. You can use a 5 if you want. I really don't care. But the 6 T's starts with turn, then time, twist, turn, time, twist, throttle, talk, and track. Now, when it comes to each of these points, it's important to realize that you're supposed to look at these and say, do I need to use them? So it's more like a question mark. Do I need to turn? How about time? Twist, throttle, talk, track. You want to question each of these points. Question those points. So let's go ahead and say we've just entered into a hold, right? So let's say the airplane is here. We are inbound to this VOR right here, and we're going to do a hold. Let's say we're going to hold, inbound on this radial, and we're going to be doing, say, I don't know, do left turns like this. We're going to go out, and we're going to come back in. We're going to do a hold, and we are here on this where this airplane is right now. How do we use the 6 T's, right? So basically, I use the 6 T's whenever I cross a waypoint, like cross the VOR in a hold, or I am, starting another segment of an approach or a procedure. So I'm going to change the color on the marker here. So I'm flying along and I get to my point. Okay, at this point now, yes, I need to turn. So I'm going to turn. And in what case I'm going to turn to a heading of, let's say 360 or whatever it is, the outbound for the teardrop entry. So I'm going to turn. Cool. Check. Now I'm going to time. Well, yes, I need time for my, 1 minute. So turn time. Twist. Do I need the twist? And the answer is yes, because previously, my course selected inbound here was whatever the inbound was to this radial. In fact, I was probably twisted to something probably like, the 360 inbound. But now I need a twist to my inbound for the hold of, let's just say that's, I don't know, 160 or something like that, right? I need to go ahead and twist to that. So I'll twist to that. Turn, time, and twist, throttle. Well, I should have already been at or close to my holding speed by the time I got to that holding point. I forget the exact regulation on this, and one of you guys that uses this regularly can tell me. But there are holding speeds that you have to comply with at certain altitudes, and you have to be at that speed within a certain time frame. Who can tell me what the speed within a certain, or what the time frame is for being at your holding speed?
Is it 200? I think under 14,000 or something like that.
So it's under 6,000. It's 200 knots. Yeah.
Okay.
So I just had to look this up because I haven't thought about this in a very long time. But you have to be at or below the maximum holding speed within 3 minutes of crossing the holding fix. That's what the FAA says in the AIM. So within 3 minutes, I need to be at my holding speed. So my throttle should be set at this point to, so my throttle should be set, somewhere out here to make sure that within 3 minutes, I'm at the speed. Cool. So nice. Throttle, well, question mark. I don't really need to touch the throttle right now, so I'm not even going to mess with it. So I probably don't need to touch that. Cool. Talk. Do I need to tell ATC anything? Well, the answer is yes, maybe. You have to tell ATC when you enter into a hold. Now, some people would say, well, does that mean you tell them as soon as you cross the holding fix, or do you tell them you enter the hold as soon as you get inbound and cross it for your first turn? Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think that matters too much. I would tell you, I tell them whenever I cross the holding fix. That's what I do. So when I cross the holding fix and I am starting my entry, that is when I tell them I have entered the hold and it is this time. There may be people who have varying opinions on that. I may be completely outright wrong. And if anybody knows that I'm wrong on that, tell me and I'll correct it. But in my years of flying, I have not experienced that ever being a problem. And I also haven't found any regulations that say otherwise. Anywho, so talk, Yes, well, I probably should tell ATC that I've entered the hold. So yes, I'm going to talk right there. And track. Do I need to track anything right now? Well, not really. All I need to track right now is whatever heading this is to get to my outbound. So now let's say the timer expires. I get to this point here. Now what do I do? Right? So I have turned, time, twist, throttle, talk, track. So I need to turn right now. Cool. So I need to turn to my 160 inbound or to whatever heading will give me my intercept. So I'm going to turn. Cool. I'll turn to say like a 180 or something. Turn. Do I need the time? No, not really. I just need to intercept right now. So turn, time, twist. Nope, I've already twisted. That was already been done. Throttle. Nope, taken care of. Talk. No need to say anything. How about track? Yes, I need to track because it's now time to intercept that 160 course inbound. So I need to track. So I'm going to start tracking that. Cool. So let's say I get it wrong, I get around the corner and I get to right here and I'm tracking. As soon as I intercept that radial, it's now time to turn again. Yes, turn to 160. Time, yes, time for a minute. Or actually on the entry, you don't really need the time. So you don't have the time on the entry so much because your entry is not the basis of how you complete this hold. The real timing happens on the outbound so that you can get as close to when you possibly can on the inbound. But I wouldn't worry about that too much for you guys. So anyway, you could time if you wanted to. And then twist, no need, you're already taken care of. Talk, no need to say anything. Track, just keep tracking in inbound. So we get to the next point, which is the point where you start the hold. So you're at the VOR. I'm going to turn. Now, do I time here? Well, possibly. Are you partial panel, right? Do you not have a heading indicator? Those are reasons why you definitely need a time. I typically time anyway. I'll start my timer as soon as I start the turn, just out of habit, because I want to have the good habit of timing in the turns on a hold so that if I do lose my heading indicator or something, I can go ahead and have that ready. So turn, time, twist. No need to twist right here because I've already got 160 inbound labeled. No need to twist. Throttle, nope. Talk, nope. Track, don't have to track anything except for my outbound heading. So I'll track that. Cool. I get to the end of my outbound heading. And then, or I'm sorry, I get to the point where I start my turn, which is right here. And I say, well, do I need to turn now? Nope, just fly straight. Time, yes. Time to time, right? Time right there because I got to start for 1 minute. Dot, 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 dot. 1 minute goes up and I would end right there. No need to talk, no need to track. I get to the end of my 1 minute, turn, get time, turn if I want to. Turn, time, twist. Nope, I'm already twisted. Throttle, nope. Talk, nope. Track, yes. Time the track inbound, just like that. So that's an example of how you can use your 6 T's. Now, does anybody have any questions or comments related to that?
Can I add just one thing in there? I've got to pop off here in a second, but I do have an additional T that we sometimes throw in depending on the airplane, which is tires. So if you're flying a retractable gear airplane, at different points, you're gonna need to put the tires down. And then just the other thing, it works wonderfully, the T's, because they align with our rules of flying an airplane, right? Aviate first, navigate second, and then talk last. So that's why that talk T is last.
Exactly. Very good input, John. I appreciate that. Tires, I've never heard of that, and I'm going to start using that. That's wonderful. So turn, time, twist, throttle, talk, track, tires. 7 T's now. Man, we start adding a lot of T's to this. We're going to have this like, I don't know. We're going to teapot with us when we're flying or something. I don't know. All right, cool. Well, hey, I appreciate that, John.
All right, have a good day, guys. I got to pop off for my other job, so I'll talk to you guys later.
All right, we'll see you, man. All right, cool. So there's an example of the 6 T's, or the 5 T's, or now 7 T's as we have it. So we've got time for some more questions. Got 15 minutes before the call is up. So you guys have been very patient. Della, you had your hand raised earlier. We're going to go ahead and get to you now. So just go ahead and make your question.
Hey, Toby, are we just talking about holds, or I could ask anything in instruments?
Anything instruments. Today is strictly Q&A. We were talking about holds because a question was asked on that earlier, and it was kind of the topic.
I'd like to know more about ODPs, stars, and SIDs. If I could get your opinions on that, and maybe get some knowledge from your experience.
Sure, we can do that. I see that basically none of you guys have your cameras turned on, and I would really appreciate it if you turned your cameras on. It makes it easier for me to teach, and I can see facial expressions and things. So I've got just a couple of them on. It's you don't have to, but it would really make my day because I want to see who I'm talking to. That makes it a little easier. There we go. All right. Very nice. Perfect. Now I feel like I'm actually in the classroom now. So, all right. Hold is not holds. ODP, SID, stars. What specific questions do you have on that?
But I just wanted to know the basics, like the differences and all that stuff. Like probably different departure procedures, I think. I know like
Sure.
some of it with obstacle clearances and all that, but I think I have sometimes a hard time reading them on the charts.
Sure.
Sometimes when it
Okay.
gets really, really tricky.
I totally understand. I'm going to pull up an example for you here. Now, here's back to my iPad. I'm going to break this down for you in 3 phases. I actually gave this lesson the other day, so I'm going to break it down in an abridged version here, and then I'll show you some real life examples on some departure procedures and arrival procedures. So there's basically 3 phases in a flight. You've got departure, en route,
And arrival.
and arrival, right? Now, if you were in the last lesson, what were those basically 2 rules that you had to always comply with in departure, en route, and arrival?
I gotta know where am I going and how am I arriving, basically.
You gotta be able to
Navigation,
navigate. The second
communicate.
thing is this simple. It's don't hit stuff.
Oh,
I know it's kind of funny, but it's so important for people to realize this is the way we navigate both in VMC and in IMC. It's all about navigating and not hitting stuff. Now, how do we do it in VMC? Well, easy. We use our eyeballs. Our eyeballs we use to look at stuff and say, ooh, there is a antenna right there. And then you say, okay, I see an antenna. How about we not hit the antenna? Right? That'd be pretty simple. It's like, oh, well, there's a river that flows around this antenna or whatever, you know? How about we follow the river around the antenna, you know? I follow rivers, you know, IFR, it's flying IFR, I follow rivers, you know? So, I mean, there's a million different ways you can do this, but the idea is step 1 is, you know, use your eyeballs, right? But here's a question. Whose responsibility is it if you hit something if you're using your eyeballs?
my responsibility.
It's yours. If you hit something because you used your eyeballs, you are the one to blame, right? So that is pilot responsibility, which is why air traffic control will oftentimes ask you if you are below the minimum vectoring altitude in that area. They'll ask you, number 1, 2, 3, 4, are you able to maintain your own terrain and obstruction clearance between your present altitude and, say, I don't know, 3,000? And if you say yes, that means you're saying, I will use my eyeballs to not hit anything or whatever I'm comfortable using. Like you could say, I'm going to use my obstacles on ForeFlight or something to not hit anything, which is kind of sketchy because, you know, those aren't always updated. There may be a new crane or a new building put somewhere that you didn't know about. So hopefully you won't hit anything. Sometimes it can be local knowledge. You know, I mean, I know where basically every single tower in this county that I'm in is located because I've flown over every single one of them a million times. And when a new one pops up, it's like, oh, wow, there's a new tower there, right? So I know if I fly this general heading at this general altitude and climb, I'm probably not going to hit anything. But then again, it's my responsibility. I have to be comfortable knowing that it's my responsibility to not hit the towers, not ATC's. So anyway, this being said, you can use your eyeballs to navigate. Another form of navigation is whatever's published. Published procedures. If you hit something and you are flying a published procedure, whose responsibility is that?
FA.
Exactly. The FAA is responsible if you hit something on a published procedure. So it's really, really nice when you can transfer the responsibility from you to the feds. It's like, I don't want to get sued. You know what I'm saying? I'd prefer to have someone else get sued before me, right? So that being said, if you can fly a published procedure, you know that you're able to navigate. Cool. Now, I also say, your eyeballs, right? You can fly a non-published route by using, airways and different things like that. But even then, if you're using not airways, you just VOR radials and point-to-point navigation. But then again, you're still using published altitudes, like your Oroka off-route obstacle clearance altitude, and different altitudes published by the FAA like that to guarantee that you're not going to hit anything, right? But let's say that you don't use the Oroka, for not hitting stuff. Which, by the way, the whole don't hit stuff and navigate stuff is all the same items. It's the same 3 items. It's basically eyeballs. I'm going to write this over here. It's eyeballs, which means pilot responsibility, whatever is published, and then ATC is what I always say. And you could say that there's more, but I like to just boil it down to this. So let's say this. Let's say the Oroka in your area is, 7,100 feet, right? And you want to fly a flight from A to B, and you want to fly that flight at 7,000 feet. Well, that's totally legal to do that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. However, it's now a matter of, do you have visual contact on what you're looking at? That's the first question, which doesn't really matter if you're flying on an IFR flight plan at this point, because if it's not published, ATC is not going to give you something that is below their minimum vectoring altitude, right? So if I'm flying from A to B and I want to go at 7,000, well, I look at the Oroka. If I'm below the Oroka, I have to make sure that air traffic control is okay with it. Because air traffic control, let's say their MVA in that area, their minimum vectoring altitude, MVA, is, let's say it's, 50 or 3,100, right? Well, then ATC has no problem with me at 7,000. But what happens if ATC goes away? What happens if I have to squawk 7,600?
To the highest altitude.
Yeah,
Seven
I have to
7,000.
exactly. I have to follow MEA, right? Minimum IFR altitude for that area versus my expected versus my assigned. I was assigned 7,000. I don't have anything to expect right now, so my minimum altitude for segment of flight is 7,100. So I'd have to climb to that. And there's actually a really good post on this in the mastermind community. So, which is free, by the way. For those of you who didn't see my post today, I have made the IFR mastermind community 100% free for anybody who wants to join. The only thing that you would upgrade to for membership levels would be this kind of coaching, which happens one-on-one and in the group setting like we're doing right now. So all this to say here, this is all having to do with ODPs, SIDS, and STARS. We can use published procedures, we can look outside, or we can have ATC help us. Now, that being said, how do we apply this to a flight plan? Because this is how choosing ODPs versus SIDS and things like that make a difference. So let's go ahead and look at some things in ForeFlight. While I'm pulling this up, Ming, Ko, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. It's just gonna be a quick one. So when I'm on the approaches and I'm entering the initial fix and my localizer is alive, could I start descending but not descend till my final fix altitude?
One more time.
So if when I'm entering onto my initial fix and my localizer is alive, could I still descend to the minimum for the final approach fix point before I totally intercept my vertical and my localizer? Then I could descend to MDA
if the localizer is alive, you can
Yeah.
descend to whatever altitude is within that block. So this is not a localizer approach. This is an RNAV. But if you're getting vectored somewhere in this area,
Yeah.
you can descend down to 4,700 once you're actually on the localizer. And the on the localizer means that the needles are alive and moving towards the center.
So it's alive and moving towards the center. But I cannot descend below the 4,700 until I'm totally intercept. Am I
Yeah,
right?
once you can't go below 47 until you're at JZ.
Until I'm chasing. Okay.
Yeah, after JZ, you can go down to 3620 by JICSAP. And then after JICSAP, Wozer at 2220.
Okay, that makes sense now. So, because I want to do it a little bit earlier so I could be ahead of the aircraft. Because I'm always struggle on the approaching to final fix, and I start losing my altitude, or I'm starting overwhelming too much. So I try to get ahead on the aircraft and just try to do my approaches a little bit earlier and get to a certain altitude before I reach my final fix and continue
Sure.
my descent. So that's
Yeah,
my
no, that's a good
question.
question. That's a good question. Okay, let's look at this example here. We're going to fly a flight here from Whiteman. Let's see, Whiteman to, I don't know, pick an airport. Anybody here from SoCal?
I am. I live in San Diego. I fly at Gillespie.
All right, Gillespie, it's SEE. So don't ask me how I know all the airports in SoCal. It's not important right now. So we'll fly a tech route, right? So we go to routes, which it's going to be Burbank Papa 29. So you'd select that one, select the route, 13,000, whatever. And you can fly that route all the way down. Of course, I never liked flying over the Julian area because it's just so hilly. I like being
Too
able
much-
to,
yeah,
see
Too
ocean,
much
not
terrain.
mountains. I'm sorry, say again.
No, it's a lot of terrain. That's why elevation is too high.
Yeah, it is. So I'd probably I'd probably route myself over I'd try to fly over LAX and then join Victor 25 and then or Victor 23 or something. I like Victor 23 Seal Beach Oceanside and then Mission Bay. I like that. But anyway, so let's say I'm gonna fly this flight, right? So I understand that I have airways that give me published, information. I know that at this altitude, I'm not going to hit anything, and I'm going to have guaranteed navigational signal between these points, so on. We understand that.
Yeah.
So the trick here is, how do I know? Do I fly a SID? Do I fly an ODP? Whatever. So you look back down here and you say to yourself, taking off from the Whiteman Airport and getting to my very first point on my fix, on my route here, which is Victor 186. Right? How do I get from Whiteman to Victor 186 when the ceiling is so low you can't see your nose in front of your face? Right? Like, how do I get there? Right? And the answer is some kind of departure procedure, right? Which is published. So published or eyeballs, right? Or ATC. Right? So ATC might give me a vector or some kind or whatever, right? But I never really want to rely on ATC for these types of things because ATC does not always exist, right? You want to find yourself in a position to where if ATC is not there, can I safely get out? Because squawking 7600 is slightly more common than one might believe. Think about it. Think about it. How many of you guys are idiots like me that forget to turn the radio volume up? And ATC is like, hey, where you at? What you doing? And I'm like, yeah, my bad. Volume was low. And like F-16s pulling up beside me. Like, they don't actually do that, no. But with the F-16s, I mean, they could. If I was busting the Bravo at LA, I might have some Black Hawk come and chew me out. But anyway, so yeah, don't do that, guys. I'm telling you right now, do yourself a favor and check your radio volume. There's actually a story, believe it or not, the story of a guy that was flying from I'm not sure if I think he was flying from Grand Canyon. So he was flying from Canyon, which is in this area, down the route here, and he was going to Chino, which is right here. He was flying this radial to Paradise VOR and whatever, and he was going to fly the ILS and the Chino, but he lost his radio communications. Turns out his radios actually still works just fine, but the G1000 was showing an indication that the radios weren't working. All he had to do was switch to manual mode on the G1000 or something, and the radios would start working again. So his intercom failed, not his radios, but because his intercom failed, he didn't know how to reactivate his radios. So he ended up being lost comm and had to, you know, shoot the approach and do the hold and everything, and then come in, and it was a whole pain. So you want to know the rules for this. But moving forward, I've got eyeballs, ATC, or published routes. So I look at Whiteman and I think, okay, how can I get out of this airport? What kind of procedures do I have for departure? I have an obstacle departure procedure here. Wonderful. First, I'm going to look at takeoff minimums just for purposes of conversation. Let's see what we have here. So Whiteman, it's going to say takeoff obstacle notes. That's just all the trees and towers in the area. Don't worry about those. I mean, worry about them if you care about them, but it's mainly just, hey, advisory, these are there. It says departure procedure, use Whiteman departure. Okay, cool. So I'll go back and use the Whiteman departure.
Okay.
But here's a question. What if it does not say departure procedure, right? So at my home airport, where I'm sitting here in the conference room right now, here in Dixon, procedure, departure, takeoff mins. Let's see here. All right. At Dixon, it just says takeoff minimums for 17, which takeoff minimums only apply to air carriers. They don't apply to us.
400 feet and 1 statute mile visibility.
Yeah,
Is that it?
400 feet and 1/7/8 mile visibility is the minimum visibility and ceiling for air carriers. We're Part 91, so we don't care about that. It doesn't matter to us.
Mhm.
But other carriers do. So there's no departure procedure. So how do I know that I can get out of Dixon safely? There's only one correct answer here. And that one correct answer is eyeballs.
Oh.
That's it. There's no published procedure. There's no control tower. I have to take pilot responsibility to see and avoid. So that's really easy at Dixon, because Dixon is out here in the flat country. I tell you, like, there's nothing there. I mean, there's a couple towers off the end of the runway. They're really easy to see. They're only 318 feet high. And they're way off the end of the runway. I mean, you got to really be trying to hit those things. So, but get this is actually a really cool hint for you guys. You wonder, if there's an airport that has takeoff minimums, just like what Dixon has, how can I use these takeoff minimums to kind of give me a hint as to what a departure procedure might look like here? Because I'm responsible for getting out of here safely, so I want to do all my due diligence and research, right? I mean, there's some head nods going on in the Zoom right now. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? So I can look at this and I can say, okay, I need to have at least 400-foot ceiling and almost 2 miles of visibility. Why? Maybe because there's a 300-foot tower 2 miles off the end of the runway. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? So you can kind of use that information to say, I think I might need to be aware of that tower. That tower seems pretty important. Alternatively, if you don't have that ceiling, then it says they want you to be able to do at least 300 feet per nautical mile climb until you get to 1,400 feet. Why? Well, 370 feet per nautical mile. Let's do some math here. Let's figure out, where is that tower off the end of the runway? So I'm going to go to obstacles. And let's go to aeronautical and clear all this stuff out. Come on. There we go. That's not working. Clear, clear. There we go. Okay. So I think it's this tower It's 91 feet, 209, 281. I don't know. We'll just say this one right here. We'll just use some eyeball, right? So departure end of the runway is there, and we can drag it down to, let's just say right between these two towers. That's probably the average. So 1.4 nautical miles we see. Okay, so we want to be able to do at least 375 or 70 feet per nautical mile. So I'll go to my calculator. Sometime this year, maybe. Okay, so 370. Does it add? Why does a calculator have ads on it? Like who invent this is communist right here. This is not okay. Like this is America, darn it. Okay, there we go. All right, 370 times, say 1.4 nautical miles equals 518 feet. So they want us to be at least 518 feet high by the time we get 1.4 miles out. Well, if we're 518 feet, we're going to be 200 feet above that tower, right? So it's saying, hey, just a hint, you can avoid this tower pretty easily by following, these basic instructions. And they're not guaranteeing you anything. They're just saying, hey,
So you don't hit stuff. Yeah.
it's just good stuff to look at. I also am really just disappointed that Apple does not include a calculator built in to the iPad. Like this is not cool. But anyway, so that's an example there. Dixon used to have a takeoff procedure, and it literally used to say, maintain runway heading to 1,400 feet before turning left is all it said. Like, don't turn left until you're at 1,400 feet. And I'm like, all right. So I'm not sure why they got rid of that. Maybe because they put another tower down there. So also totally unrelated fact, but Dixon is 200 miles from Dayton, but they have the exact same runway layout and the exact same terminal building. It's like they just copied and pasted both airports from some Tennessee Airport Association was like, hey, we're too lazy to design a new airport, so we're just gonna pop this one over here. But anyway, so does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay,
Very
cool.
well.
We're
Well,
over the time limit, but that's okay. I'm going to finish your question on ODPs, SIDS, and stars.
So
So
sorry
let's
for
go back.
taking
That's no problem. Let's go back here to Whiteman. Select departure, Whiteman 1 departure. No transition, runway, whatever. Let's see if I can make this work. Does it pull the plate up? It does not. Okay. So I'm going to have to go back to plates. Whatever. I'll just do it this way. KWHP. Procedure, departure, Whiteman 1 obstacle. Okay, so what's the difference between an obstacle departure procedure and a SID, right? So an obstacle departure procedure, they can be graphical like this, or they can be just text. That's the first thing. So Dixon used to have an obstacle departure procedure, but it wasn't complex enough to require a graphic. So the Whiteman 1 departure procedure, all it does is get you above the obstacles. It doesn't really help you in the way of navigation. I mean, it gives you a VOR. So you're able to navigate to the VOR, but you're only using that VOR from a standpoint of don't hit anything taken off out of Whiteman. That's the only thing they give you. I mean, it takes you to Van Nuys. I mean, how anticlimactic is that? That's just nothing. It's just like, oh yeah, hey, you're in the same county. Congratulations, right? Like pat on the back, right? So what this procedure says is it says, hey, taking off of this runway, climbing right turn direct to the VOR. So runway 12 is this way, climbing right turn direct to the VOR. So if you do that, you're good. Then it says, do that to at or above 4,600 feet. So get to the VOR and climb out on this radial, because this radial is guaranteeing you're not going to hit anything if you're climbing up to 4,600. Cool.
Oh,
Now get
okay.
this. On the takeoff minimums, it's telling you what kind of climb rate you need to have. Now, I'll tell you something about this. The takeoff minimums are based on like part 121, part 135, so on. They don't apply to part 91. However, I fly a citation, and I fly a citation that is historically known to be underpowered. Now, the one that we have is actually got the upgraded engine, so it's actually quite the pocket rocket, and it's great. But most Citation 501s and 500s have the climb rate of a squirrel. So it's pretty anemic. So if I was flying that airplane, I would think, okay, what if I lose an engine and I've got to climb out in this procedure, right? Because dual engine, who cares? But single engine, it's pretty bad. I mean, I would make decisions taking off out of an airport based on I lose an engine. Now, single engine, you're toast. So just figure it out, right? But dual engine, you have, an opportunity. So I would look here and I would say, okay, takeoff minimums. It says I need to be able to do at least 292 feet per nautical mile to 1,300. Now, what is the FAA standard for climb rate, right? The FAA, whenever they publish procedures, they always base it off of you being able to do 200 feet per nautical mile. So as long as you're able to do at least 200 feet per nautical mile, you should be able to not hit anything between here and here. And then, of course, once you get to 4,600, you're basically clear of everything in that area. Do a nice big left turn back around to the Van Nuys VOR, and then go on course. And it says do that at or above the MEA for your route of flight. So that gets you out of Whiteman. There's no SID, there's no transitions. Think about it. If I go back to Burbank, which is very similar in a similar location, I used to be an air traffic control specialist for Pilot Edge, for those who have heard of that. And Pilot Edge was all on Southern California. So we did a bunch of air traffic control for like training simulators and like the Air Force and Gulfstream and a bunch of other big companies. It was really cool. But that's how I know all these airports. So go to procedures and go to departure. I have a lot of departure procedures here. Now, these aren't just obstacle departure procedures. These are standard instrument departure procedures. Because if you'll remember, let's go to new here. If you remember this, a DP can be an ODP or a SID.
SID.
Yeah, or a SID, right? So far we've covered an ODP, right? A SID is a standard instrument departure. It gives you all the benefits of an ODP, plus gets you to the airway that, gets you where you want to go. It has some kind of transition to it. So back to airports. Let's look at the, I don't know, the Van Nuys 3 departure. See? So this is significantly more complex than the ODP out of Whiteman. So you see takeoff minimums. You have to be able to make these work, which technically under Part 91, there's some differences, but and this is actually something that I have not thought about in a while. I need to look this up. And that's one thing, guys, is just because I'm an instructor with thousands and thousands of hours of flight time in instructing does not mean I remember every single rule that's ever been made. Like, I've forgotten a lot of weird nitpicky rules. So what I like to do is I tell people, I say, look, if I'm ever wondering, okay, well, this rule here, do I have to maintain this? The first thing I do is I think, which is more conservative? The first thing I do is I figure that out. I say, okay, well, I'm going to go with I have to because that's more conservative. That's the first thing you do while you're figuring it out. Then I Google it. And if I find a FAA reference that says, hey, that's required, then I say, okay, cool. So go with a more conservative one until you know the exact answer, and then proceed to look it up. I mean, I literally passed my CFI check ride by calling my mechanic and asking him a question. Like, while the FAA guy was sitting there, I was like, hey, man, I got to look this up. Let me call the mechanic. And he's like, did you check this regulation here? And I said, oh, crap, no. Mr. Examiner, sir, the answer is whatever, right? It was something stupid. Like, is the pedostatic required on this airplane or something? But anyway, so it gives you the takeoff minimums there, guaranteeing you're not going to hit anything. Now, I can say, okay, well, I'm going to fly from Burbank to to Daggett, which is way out here near Los Angeles, or not Los Angeles, Las Vegas. So I'll fly from Van Nuys up this airway along here, all on this whole route until I get to where I'm trying to go. And it has, of course, MEAs that guarantee my navigation signal. There's a navigation part of the whole departure, en route, and arrival, right? I got navigation guaranteed. I'm not going to hit anything, right? So airways can give me that. But I'm going to go to the next page here and see, what do I do? Like, what's the procedure? How do I get out of this airport? So typically, if you take off out of runway 8 at Burbank, they'll always give you a heading of 210 or 213 or whatever. And then it says, expect radar vectors to the VOR. So let's talk about this. Is this pilot nav? Is this ATC? Like, what's going on, right? So this is a published procedure. So we have that. But guess what? There is no published procedure, quote unquote, between the end of the runway and the VOR you're going to. There's a section of ATC vectors right here. But here's a question. If ATC decides to go and you're toast, what do? You follow the published procedure, which is that. Expect. That word expect covers an AVF, right? The acronym that you guys learned for lost comms. Let me find it, bring my thickness down a little bit. Remember, assigned, vectored, expect, and filed, right? The expect right here covers the E in AVF for 91-185. For those of you who don't know the regulations on lost communications, for the FAA anyway, it's 91-185. Expect says, hey, if you lose ATC, go direct to Van Nuys VOR. And they did that knowing that any runway you take off out of this airport, climbing like a normal airplane per the procedure, you're not gonna hit anything getting to Van Nuys. So Burbank is right here. So if I take off of runway 8 and I fly a heading of 210 like this, I can guarantee you're not gonna hit anything if you lose ATC communications and go direct to Van Nuys. I mean, there's some little hills over here, but especially if you're in a jet, which is the average aircraft flying that procedure, you're going to be well above 2126 by the time you get to Van Nuys. Like, you'll be at 5,000 by right here. So that's just something to think about. But going back to that procedure, it tells you what you need to do right there. And then it says, then via this transition on this route. And it gives you a whole route to fly. And it's just happy, happy, joy. It's just, that's all you got to do. So
it makes a pilot life easy.
It does. It's all designed to keep all the airplanes going the same direction like they're supposed to be. It makes ATC's life easy, makes your life easy, so on. Last example is going to be a star for you, just to kind of get that out of there. I don't like leaving people hanging on the group calls, so we're just going to go ahead and answer that real quick. And I really enjoy doing these, so I've always wanted to do something like this. Arrival. Let's say we're flying back into this airport here, and we're going to fly the Lynx 8 arrival. The Lynx 8 arrival is also anticlimactic. It's very easy. It's very basic. So we're coming back in from Daggett, right? We have a route. We just fly this airway. I mean, it's literally a 239 radial, be at least 8,000 for 66 miles. I mean, it's just like an airway, right? You fly that, you get to Woolley. If you're a jet, you're probably going to be there around 14,000, just heads up. Why 14,000? Well, jets are flying under flight levels. And because of the way the air traffic control airspace is all laid out, I mean, the airspace in this area looks kind of like this. It's like Los Angeles is south of this direction. Then you've got an airspace right here. Kind of does this number. Then kind of cuts off right here and then goes like this and then kind of comes down. Oops, it cut out on me. Whatever. Kind of comes down like this. Goes out this way. This is the Glendale sector. This up here is the Palmdale sector. This down here is the Riverside sector. You guys aren't going to know any of that. It's fine. That's just a nerdy air traffic control thing. But point is, there's sectors, and they're laid out in a way to where all these airplanes that are going into Los Angeles, in and out of LA, they can be predictably separated. Because when you got 8,000 flights a day coming into, an area, you're gonna get some traffic jams going on, right? So this is a way to mitigate that. But anyway, you'll follow the procedure coming down. These give you guaranteed altitudes, whatever. Coming on down, turbojet, Janny, 8,000, whatever. Whatever. And then you'll get to links. At links, there is a holding pattern. It's published only to say that if air traffic control needs you to hold at links, they will say hold at links is published. Expect for the clearance in 20 minutes. That way, if they're clogged up, they can unclog the pipe while you sit there and spin little circles and get dizzy. And then when you're sufficiently dizzy, they'll let you fly the approach because that's totally safe, right? But anyway, you'll hit links, and then from links, the entire procedure is literally links to Van Nuys, at least 6,000. And that's the procedure. The solid black line here, the thicker one that goes from here to here versus the skinny one that goes from here up to here, this means it's required on the procedure. So all of this up here, those are all transitions that are optional, but the main procedure starts here at links. Why is not really important, but that's just the case. And then it says down here, fly the procedure until you get to links, and then from links, fly this radial to this VOR. Expect radar vectors to final approach course after the VOR. So what does that give you? If ATC loses communication with you, once you get past the Van Nuys VOR, fly an approach. Oh, and that's really nice because if you look at Burbank, the approaches, let's pull up the, I don't know, the VOR for runway 8. The VOR for runway 8 has a point from Van Nuys. See, it has this little feeder route right here. See? This little feeder route takes you to Suwana, which is all the way out here, which is your initial approach fix. See? So now you can do your parallel entry, come back around, hit Suwana, and fly the approach inbound to Burbank.
Mm-hmm.
So there's your lost comms procedure. Everything that when I'm thinking about pilot navigation, I'm always thinking about what am I going to do if I lose the radios? For example, I never ever, unless it's a VFR crystal clear day with no problems, you are never going to see me file from A to B direct. You're always going to see me file a published arrival or to an IAF. I want to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if I'm going to be flying into this airport, I can get myself to either an IF, preferably an IAF, some kind of initial fix that will guarantee me that if I am coming in from this direction and I lose comms, I'm going to go to this fix, I'm going to fly this approach and be safe. I never want to have to worry about the whole, well, do you hold? You guys know in the regulations how it says, well, you got to hold at this VOR until your ETA, and then you got to, do I hold at the VOR? Do I hold at the airport? Where do I hold? What do I hold at? The lost comms rules are so complex because they were designed in the 1960s when we didn't have GPS. So what we need to do is figure out how to plan our flights in a way that makes sense for the real world of flying today. And that's one of the reasons why whenever I fly back into my home airport here at Dixon, I pull it up right here. I always file, we only have one approach here, the RNAV 17. I always file to either COSMU or XJEP or UNSES because I want to know that if something goes wrong, the air traffic controller is expecting me to fly this approach. So I'm not going to
do an airport, huh? You filed it to the initial approach.
I filed to the airport, but I always put the initial approach fix in my route.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a very basic example of planning arrivals and departures. There's a lot more to it. I mean, you could go into airways, you could go into, routing, weather, different things, but That's just the basic idea. Can you navigate and can you not hit stuff? And I'll tell you, 99% of the time, you're going to be flying GPS direct everywhere you go, until you get into really complex airspace like this, where they're going to give you airways and different things. But yeah, so that's that. Any questions?
No, I think I'm good. I was just gonna ask you, do you have to call the ATC to like file an ODP or a SID, or you just put it on a flight plan just like that?
So an ODP, you don't have to, how does this work? There's a regulation on that. Basically, any kind of like departure procedure, you're allowed to fly. You're allowed to fly an obstacle departure procedure without getting cleared by the controller to do that, unless the controller gave you some other instruction.
Okay.
Now, a SID, you have to get clearance for.
Mhm.
So
Right.
like out of Dixon, remember Dixon used to say runway heading until 1400 before turning left or whatever it was?
Mhm.
I don't
Yep.
have to have a clearance to fly that, but I have to have
Okay.
a clearance to fly the Dixon 1 departure or whatever.
Okay.
If it was a SID, ODPs aren't required. In fact, the common procedure for Whiteman Airport is actually to clear every IFR aircraft must fly the Whiteman 1 departure. So out of Whiteman, you are always going to go from Whiteman to Van Nuys, go out, and then back to Van Nuys. You're always going to do that until you're high enough and air traffic control can give you vectors to wherever it is you're trying to go.
Mhm. Right.
Okay, cool. Well, that's all the
Good.
time I've got for today for that. That's a great question you had. Does anybody have any closing remarks or quick questions, comments, concerns, corrections, anything that you want to discuss, or maybe say something that your takeaways were? Like, what are your takeaways today from this lesson? And not just Della, but Xander and Krilo and everybody else. What are your takeaways from today's lesson?
Toby, another question. Please, can you open arrival chart, please? Any? What
Pull up a what?
arrival chart?
Arrival chart. Pull one up. Okay.
And I didn't catch where is the indication of initial approach fix on it. Is it indicated somewhere or?
Okay. So I'll pull up one for you. Not every arrival takes you to an initial approach fix. The whole point here is when I get to the end of the arrival, I want to know that I am expecting to fly an approach.
Yes,
I'm
I
going to
mean
put,
transition point between arrival and approach plates.
you're asking the difference between an arrival and an approach plate?
No. I'm asking about, for example, I will show you now. Yes,
Okay,
how to understand here where is initial approach fix?
great question.
Yes,
There
because
is,
my chart it is indicated IAF, sorry. Yes, but
yes,
here I can't see some indication of transition point to next approach chart. I mean
yes.
this one.
There is no IAF on this arrival,
Mhm.
but it still gives you instructions to get to an approach. And here's how. The whole reason that we care about this is because I don't want to get to the end of this procedure. I don't want to get to here at drink and then have no idea what I'm doing. I want to know if I lose ATC communications, how do I get to the airport? That's the big question. How do I get to the airport if I lose communication with ATC? So the answer is simple. What are the
But you
lost comm procedures for this approach? So if I am going to fly to one of these airports, I would follow this instruction. If I'm flying to one of these airports, I would follow this instruction. We're going to pick, say, this airport right here. Romeo, Yankee, Yankee. Or Kilo, Romeo, Yankee, Yankee. From Highlands to Buckhead to Drink, and then on track 152, expect radar vectors to final approach course. So that is my last instruction. So I will fly from Drink here on a 152 and expect vectors. Now, if I lose air traffic control communication, how do I fly and approach? Well, I must go to this airport and see what approaches exist. So in my planning, I already know which side of the airport I'm on, but let's say it doesn't matter. Let's say that I am going to fly the RNAV runway 9er into this airport. Well, I have a GPS at this point, so a Drink is somewhere over here.
Yes.
So I would just go direct to UPA, then I would fly the approach, or I would go direct to Golgi and fly the approach. But I would do that because I have an RNP GPS. So I'm flying a GPS approach. But let's say I don't have GPS. Let's say I'm having to fly the ILS or localizer. So in this case, this procedure requires radar. So I couldn't fly this approach.
Yes.
Because I have to have ATC. So let's go to a different one. Okay, I can fly a VOR DME approach, so I'll select that. And now I say, okay, well, Drink is somewhere, over here. What would I do, right? So in this instance, I have very few options. I can either go to Rome, which is not a safe idea. That's way too far away. Or I could vector myself to final, which is also not a good idea. I have no real means of navigation.
Exactly.
Right? So there are this is an example where the rules that we have now don't make sense with the kind of navigation that we have now. This is a disconnect between real world and regulations. In the real world, we have GPS. So it's easy. Like I said, I would fly, to this fix here and fly the approach. And air traffic control would give that to me if they were online. But if I don't, I may have to divert to an alternate. But also remember this, the Buckhead arrival is RNAV. So I would never be on the Buckhead arrival anyway if I did not have GPS. So if I was flying into a Cobb County airport, let's see. See, they are all RNAV arrivals. So I have to have GPS anyway. So if I didn't have GPS, I would just file maybe, let's see, I may file the Rome VOR, which is right here, and then fly the approach into Cobb County Airport. See? So previously your question was, how do I get to the IAF from that arrival? Well, that arrival is an RNAV arrival, so it uses GPS. It brings me in to here, and then gives me vectors. If I lose ATC communication, I'm just going to go GPS direct to an initial approach fix and then fly the approach.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, Xander, do you have any questions or anything before we wrap this up?
Oh, that was very useful today. I just have a question. Maybe for our next session, you can explain how to nail a 2D approach. I know how to use the tables, but maybe you have some tips and tricks on how to absolutely nail the glide path or apply wind corrections.
Sure, sure. So you mean an ILS or a precision approach?
Yeah, something like that. And then as a 2D approach, where, for example, the glide path failed. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So 3D and 2D. Okay, cool. Yeah. We'll talk
Yeah,
about that
especially
next time.
2D. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, there's no time for today, but I wonder if you can do that tomorrow, for example.
Yeah, sure. That shouldn't be a problem. If you're here tomorrow, and make sure you raise your hand first.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, guys, I appreciate you coming out to today's lesson. And just to give you a quick recap of what's going on with the mastermind, just so you guys understand what's going on is I'm a professional flight instructor. I fly for a living, I teach for a living, and this is all that I do. You know, I'm not going off to some airline. You know, I'm already ATP rated. I just do this. So I started this so that I could be able to help more people get the best instrument training that they could get, practical for the real world. Because normally I charge a lot of money to fly with private individuals, but not everybody can either afford to do the training or they're somewhere else and they can't come here to do the training. So this is designed to get the most people that training. So the group calls are normally not free. This is normally not free. This is normally a subscription based, but I'm allowing this week, just 6 days, people to come in and say, hey, this is helpful. I want to get in on this. Because if I can get a lot of people to join this and a lot of people pay a little bit of money, then it's able to, make it affordable for me to be able to do it. And it helps more people. So that's basically how that works. So by the end of this week, you guys will be definitely satisfied and wanting to subscribe and become members to where we can get you this type of coaching and real help, real practical. Because, a lot of flight instructors that are brand new, they may have not experienced the real world of what will actually happen here. So I like to show my real world experience of flying jets and rotorcraft and airplanes and everything, be able to give you that experience. So anyway, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, Toby.
Bye.
See ya.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.